What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Emerald Grappling Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Murphy, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Rosa Walsh. For anyone who doesn't know Rosa, she is Ireland's youngest female Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's also an IBJJF No-Gi European Champion. You may have seen her compete on such shows as GrappleFest, Grapple Kings, and Who's Number One. Rosa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you very much for coming on. It took us a while to get the times to line up, but we finally got there.
Yeah.
So to kind of kick things off, could you tell us about yourself and how you got started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, so I am 26. I started Jiu-Jitsu when I was 17, so just coming up on about 9.5 years. I started Jiu-Jitsu because it was I think the natural progression in terms of my goal of MMA. Like I boxed since the age of 14, and then I did Thai boxing, and then in the gym where I was Thai boxing, there was a Jiu-Jitsu class, and it just looked really interesting, really cool. I tried it out, and then I kind of snowballed from there.
Nice. And I seen actually online that you did MMA as well. Did you stick to that for a while, or did you just naturally just progress back to Jiu-Jitsu?
I was training MMA for about 2 to 3 years. I think it was just around this was the rise of Conor McGregor, so I think everybody in Ireland thought that they could be similar to him. And I trained MMA for from the age of maybe 18 to 20, and then I fought 4 times. And then after my last fight, it was just a natural progression back to jiu-jitsu. I think for me, especially because I was so young, I never had a big goal of like going to the UFC or anything. I really loved with jiu-jitsu that I could travel so much, not really get injured in terms of like it wouldn't be the same extent, let's say, for MMA. And as well as that, it was just like I could do it every weekend, I could like there was one period of time a couple of years ago when I think I did 6 weekends of competing every weekend abroad. And it was just so cool I could do that. And there's not many sports you can do that. So I think that was the natural progression from MMA to jiu-jitsu again.
Yeah, and with a lot of like the combat sports, it's kind of one of those things where if you go 100%, it's going to take such wear and tear on the body. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, even if you're going 100%, you might pick up little injuries along the way, but it's nothing that's going to like leave you off the mats for a long time. And you can just constantly be chipping away at it and not worrying about, I don't know, hurting yourself, hurting your training partners. And yeah, it's a lot more fun than getting kicked and punched in the face. That's for sure.
Exactly. And I think for me, it was like once I did it for a short period of time, I was like, okay, I've ticked that box to some extent. And it was so fun and it was so cool. And like at the time, I had such little, I don't think I had like one, maybe two training partners, and I was just still able to achieve those heights. Like I won a belt, I got 4 submissions, and like I was able to achieve those heights in MMA with such little resources. And I was like, yeah, if I can do that, like it gave me great confidence because I was like, I can do anything.
Get to retire on top with those 4 wins and that belt. So that's a
Yeah,
good time to walk away.
it's somewhere in my cupboard collecting dust right now.
And you mentioned there that you've been in the Irish Jiu-Jitsu scene for over 9 years. How has
Yeah,
it like changed since you first started? I'd imagine it's probably exploded more than compared to when you first started.
for sure. Like it's great. That's a great question. And I think first of all, of course, it's definitely progressed and it's just exploded, like you said. I think it's important though for me anyway. I've definitely not defined, but I definitely maybe separated, let's say, the sport from the culture. I think the sport has absolutely like exploded in such a positive way. We had Tom Halpin winning trials, there's Sam winning trials. Obviously, last year with Marcus, myself, Sam, and Mara all getting to the final of the European No-Gi, like unheard of. And I think in terms of the sport, it's never been better. And like even like there's so many gyms everywhere, there's so many resources being put into jiu-jitsu. However, in terms of the culture in jiu-jitsu, it's not specifically in Ireland, but in general, I guess, it's maybe it's gotten a little bit worse. Like I think with the professional athlete lifestyle, you have to be quite like selfish and maybe in some ways this is probably a big word to use, narcissistic. And I think that definitely has translated into a few of um the interactions that I've had with some of the competitors that I've met over the last years. And that's something now for me, I don't, not that like people can do whatever they want. But in terms of for me, I really, really find it important that I have to be a good person first and then jiu-jitsu afterwards, because otherwise if people do fall into that trap, you know, of like having to play a character or having to do X, Y, and Z in order to achieve their goal of like getting on a show. And for me, I think I only ever focused on the jiu-jitsu, and I competed as much as I could. I got as much help in terms of technical advice as much as I could. And I never did it for like fame and glory and achievement. I just did it because it was a fun sport to do with my friends. And I think finding people, and it took a while, it really did take a while, finding people who had that same attitude was so important, because like we were all trying to bring each other up. We weren't trying to like maybe pull each other down. And that's both for male and female, you know, where it's like in the culture, it's like they want to be the best and they will kind of throw everybody and everything they can under the bus in order to achieve that. And they'll do everything because they want Instagram fame, they want likes, they want comments or whatever else. But for me, like, and I said this to somebody else, I think it was to Fionn, I was like, if I never win another match, okay, ever again, I'll be fine, because I have great friends, I have a great family, I have a lovely gym, the most wholesome, welcoming gym. And I think that's so important that people in the last like 4 or 5 years, they've forgotten about it because they just want the social media fame, or they want they just want the attention that they can. And this is, and I have gone through this. I have been through that period of time. I'm not just, I suppose, dictating. I'm trying to be like all grander than everybody else, but I think it's so important to just surround yourself with people where that's the attitude that they have. They don't want to just achieve all these goals for the sake of like social media, or like the wrong attention, if that makes sense.
No, that 100%
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, the in a lot of gyms, sorry, that like usually the people who are like really nice, you always gravitate towards them. They're the ones that's like helping, like the white belts, like in the gym, that
Yeah.
are, you know, have a million questions, or you'll always gravitate towards them rather than, you know, like the asshole on the mat who no one wants
Exactly.
to talk about, who's chasing medals and putting up all their wins, but they could lose a comp, but they won't post about, you know, oh, I
Yeah.
lost, I went 2-1 this weekend. Like, people just don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah, and I think it's such a admirable skill to have if you're able to own your losses as well as your wins. And I think I owned my wins for like so much, into the way where I was so embarrassed to talk about my losses. And I was like, and it was a case of where I was in my life, but it was like now, like, I very rarely put up anything on social media in terms of my wins, because it's just this massive high, this massive dopamine hit. And then if you ever were to put up your losses, then it will be just like, yeah, it may not get received the same way. So I think it's a great skill. And once again, it's down to the environment that you have. Like, there's like, I've seen it in other gyms where it's like you would have lost and nothing gets said at all, which is sometimes even worse because you're just so embarrassed. And even following a loss that I had a while ago, and it was nothing in Ireland, it was in the US, where it was like I had lost not quite badly, but it wasn't the best match of my life. And afterwards, like, nobody said anything. They didn't say well done. They didn't say like, oh, you're shit, like, fuck off. They just didn't say anything. And the lack of saying anything made it even worse, because it was never mentioned. It was kind of just like, let's sweep this under the rug. Like, she lost, okay, let's move on to the next one. Where it's like, no, like, I needed the help, technical and as well emotional, and it wasn't there. So I think it's really, really down to the people that you surround yourself with, and like, it's a great skill to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I even find where I train in Lakeland in Mullingar, and like, I am a terrible competitor, but I do it just to see if what I'm working on, it does actually work. And at one of my last competitions, I got tapped by, I think it was like an ankle lock or something. And I remember coming off the mat and I was thinking to myself, oh, this sucks. Like, I did so much training. But then Tyrone came over to me and was like, dude, you hit 2 beerimbolos in one match. That's more than I've done in a match. And I was like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty cool. And it's
Yeah,
surrounding yourself, as you said, with people like that. Like, you feel great then. You're like, yeah, I actually did something pretty cool in that match, rather than
yeah,
focusing on the loss.
of course. And it's so admirable, and it's such a great skill to like, trait to have in a coach, or like in a competitor, or in like a teammate, where it's like you said, it's like, okay, you didn't win, but X, Y, and Z happened that you've been working on for the last couple of weeks. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that it's so, so important, because then you put a lot of your work, like obviously everybody wants to be friends with everybody to some extent. And when there's a lot of work put into you, like you winning, then it's like, Jesus, like if I lose, like I'm shit. I'm a shit person. When in actual fact, you just like, you maybe didn't, like you lost a decision or something. And even then, like that situation where I was talking about, I lost a decision and I literally didn't get out of bed for 3 days. And it was really sad. And that was the turning point, because I was like, this work, like you cannot put your worth in terms of winning or losing, because my friends will still love me, my family will still love me. Like my family don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, but and so most of my friends don't train, but the teammates, they will, like, they're still gonna want to train with me, you know. And it's the weirdest thing that like perspective that people have, especially with athlete or competitors, where they kind of are like, oh, nobody will like me if I don't win. And then even saying it out, it's so irrational, but it's so like it's so ingrained in a lot of gyms and cultures that it's just kind of like, it's like wow, like. And then in terms of longevity for the sport, like I don't plan on competing, like I'd say another 3 or 4 years, and I plan on retiring, let's say, because I've just been competing for so long and I'm wrecked. But to put it lightly, and I think with that, it's like if I don't deal with that perspective issue in terms of my worth being put into competing, what's gonna happen in like 5 years when I'm not competing anymore? So I think it's so important to like to instill that from a young age, or from like a beginners to intermediate to advanced, because then when they progress on towards the rest of their jiu-jitsu career, that's already there for them. They don't have that irrational fear of, I'll be like, I'll have no friends if I don't win this match.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nearly like just trying to think, how can I phrase it? You're nearly you'll be put off the sport. Like you won't be enjoying it as much if you lose.
Yeah,
People will be like, "Oh, but you were good at," it," and you're like, "Yeah, but I've lost like just say 3 matches in a row." It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, as you said, it's longevity. It's how long you want to stay in the sport, how long you actually enjoy doing it as well. Don't be basing it on losses. Everyone loses
yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And I think for me, I've had such interesting like not environments, interesting experiences with gyms, where it's like I've been in gyms that have been so welcoming, and they're like, yeah, you like, there's a lot of competitors, there's a lot of hobbyists and stuff, and those are sometimes the nicest gyms to have, because like the hobbyists, they don't care if you won or lost, they're just doing it because they love it. And I always love modeling my behavior off them, because they like that, they're sometimes the best people to use as a role model, because they're just doing it for the pure love of it. Maybe it's an outlet for them. Maybe it's they've got obviously other different reasons for doing jiu-jitsu. But for the ones that don't compete, I think it's so admirable to see and be around them, those people, because there's just pure love, pure interest for the sport, which sometimes gets forgotten about in the competitors. Like for a while, like I suppose at maybe the start of this year, late last year, I was like, I fucking hate jiu-jitsu, you know? And it's like, because I've done it so much. Like I've done it literally not every day, but I've done it 95% of my life for the last 9 years. And there comes a time where it's like, not that I'm obviously not the best in the world by any means, but like I know a lot of the content, I know a lot of the stuff in jiu-jitsu, and a lot of times I can find it quite uninteresting. And then that's been really interesting to have in my mind, because then when I've gone, like when I was injured with my shoulder, like I've gone and like had to be a beginner at some stuff. So I started judo as a white belt. I have started doing snowboarding. Started doing some yoga, and all these things now have been so invigorating in terms of the way I learn, because it's like, okay, I'm shit at this, and it's so lovely. It's so like realistic, and it's so wholesome, because it forces me, like I am very, very determined in terms of, if I have to do something, I'll be the best at it. But if I have to do well at something, I will 100% do well at it. I will always try my best. But then in terms of jiu-jitsu, it's like, this is exactly what we did yesterday. And it's like, this is very, very monotonous. So I think bringing in that aspect of being a beginner again has been really, really great for my jiu-jitsu. But there was a long time where I was like, this isn't even fun anymore. It's just shit.
I'm glad to hear that you're out of that mindset
Yeah.
now and that you're back to fun doing it. And I'm just kind of curious, because you've been doing a load of seminars now and you've been traveling. I know that one of your goals is to visit 40 gyms by the age of 30.
40
How's that going?
countries. 40
40
countries.
countries.
Yeah.
Apologies.
I've probably been in 40 gyms at this stage. um, yeah, so I'm at about 28 countries. So I think I've got like about 4 years to do 12 more countries. Which I think will be manageable for sure. But yeah, no, it's really good. It's like the seminars are so much fun, and it's so cool to go and like see all these new countries and like have a great excuse to go and see them, you know. So I'm very, very grateful that I have these opportunities. But yeah, but it definitely is tiring.
The traveling, it catches up on you eventually. And
Mhm.
just out of curiosity, as you said, you visited so many gyms. Has there been any gym in particular that's kind of stood out for you, whether it's the environment, the people that's there, or even the facilities?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think um the one thing about the gyms in America is that sometimes like, and I've been to some great gyms in America for sure, but sometimes I think the image that has been portrayed online isn't necessarily what you get. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And like I've been to most of the big gyms, let's say in America, and like some of them are fantastic, and they're literally they hit the button with what they've been portraying online. But some of them now where it's like, I didn't really need to be here. But the two best ones that I think really like shone through to me as just being so effective in the way that they teach are obviously essential, but I am biased in that capacity. With JT, and like JT is just a gem of a human. Like dear God, he is the he's just a bundle of positivity, and he's just so like he's a fantastic human. And then the other one is AOJ. I think I went there once or twice last year, and I didn't really know what to expect. Honestly, I thought like I'd be like kind of like shoved to the back a small bit, I guess. But like it was like the way that he structured training. Like Guy Mendez was the one doing the training. He was the one hosting it, and like they train like all the competition trains from 6 to 9 a.m. every single morning, and like there's about 100 people on the mat. They're like it's incredible. It's so well structured. It's so effective, and honestly, like they don't really train that hard, which is really weird. It was a really weird concept. Like I was there for like 3 hours, and I really wasn't that sweating that much, but I felt like I was so tired because it's so strategy based. It's so like they really break down the kind of strategies in like very, very minute detail, and like they really focus on like putting you with people who are like similar to your weight category, and you'll do like 10 to 15 times for a certain like strategy or like a positional stuff. But yeah, it was so fascinating because I was like, and I'm very cynical about most people's jiu-jitsu, but this when I saw this way that this session was being structured, I was like, this is a fascinating mind at work. Like Guy Mendes obviously has created some of the best jiu-jitsu people in the world, and I was like, I can see why. And I've never really had that experience before where I was like yeah, they're just I'm a murderer for saying that, but like they obviously had a coach in Brazil, and then they just like were brought over to the US, and that's when they started winning, or for X, Y, and Z reasons. But I think when I saw that session, I was like, wow, this is really game changing.
And they're after opening that second gym now as well. So you can only imagine like the level more people are going to be coming
Yeah.
in, and it's just going to start getting better and better and better.
I know, it's incredible. And even like the systems they have in place in terms of like all the kids, all like the young kids, they're all homeschooled, and they all train together 6 to 9 a.m. Then they have their homeschooling, and then there's training again. And it's like if you have and there's a lot of situations I've seen in terms of like teaching young kids where yes, they're homeschooled, but it's just them. So they have very little maybe social skills, and like they struggle with other aspects of life. But with AOJ, there's about 50 kids, and they all do the same thing. So they're not missing out on anything. Like they're still friends with each other. They still have their education is still obviously being taught to them. And I think it's just a really clever system that Hafa and Guy have in play over there. So like you said, it's they're going to get better and better. They'll be the team to beat all teams for sure in the next say 5 years, if not already happening.
Yeah, and you see even in the last like few years, like I've seen it on Flow Grappling, like they bring such a big team for all the kids and juvenile competitions, and it's only a
Yeah.
matter of time before you'll start seeing them just clearing up in the adult divisions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely incredible.
And just even touching on, like you mentioned, you were training in gyms such as like AOJ and Essential. How does the training there compare to Ireland? I'd imagine it's completely different.
It is and it isn't. Like bar AOJ, because AOJ have something different. Even out of all the gyms, like there's something very different by the way that they structure it, which I think they're miles ahead. But in terms of the other gyms I've been in, they just train harder. That's the only difference that I've seen. And obviously, like I suppose the not the approach, but the welcome I get in a lot of these gyms, it would be different to other people's because for whatever reason, like I'm not like, oh, Fion's little friend or the girl who's in Daisy Fresh or whatever. But I think for me, like I've found the training, I've gone and experienced it, and then I've come back, and it's like everybody can do the same physical training. Like I think a lot of the times, a lot of the reasons as to why they are so good is because they have a lot more opportunities in terms of like making money or like getting on these shows. So I think the only difference there is they've got a lot more access to opportunities and they just train that little bit harder, which is kind of weird to say, but yeah.
It's true though. And do just out of curiosity, I know that a lot of the gyms in the US, like they'd have better access to like kind of wrestling and
Mm.
probably competitors in that aspect. Do you find that's something that Ireland is actually like behind on? Obviously, we don't have a proper like collegiate
Yeah.
style wrestling implemented here.
Yeah, yes and no. Like I think that's a massive part of some of the best no-gi people for sure. And like they've got people in to like teach classes, like they've got wrestling classes and stuff. But like even in Team Rhino, like Team Rhino has a fully fledged wrestling team. And like I was up there a couple of months ago with Bill McCann. And like I just like there was no difference to me. Like the wrestling class that I've done in the US was there, it was there on Dublin and fucking Finglas, like, you know, so I think it's always there for you, and as well kind of a bit of a home bird. I'm so like obviously I've gotten experience like such great wrestling, and I've that even being in the US, it forced me to incorporate it into my own game. But like now that I've come home and I'm back full time, it's like if I need to get a good wrestling session, if I feel like I'm lacking in that, drive 3 hours to Dublin to go to Bill McCann. I'm telling you, like it's all there in Ireland. It's just a case of seeking it out. Whereas in the US, you don't have to seek it out. It's there for you on a plate. So it just requires a bit more maybe autonomy in terms of the athlete to go and seek out this training. Like for me, I've been doing a lot of gi lately and I was struggling with like the takedowns and stuff. So rather than like just like watch some judo clips or like just whine about it, I went to join a judo club, you know? So it's all there in terms of the actual sport itself. It just requires, I think, in Ireland, the person or the athlete going out and taking it for themselves, which is a really lovely skill. And I think it's something now that I maybe forgot about when I went to the US, where everything was just there for you. You want a judo class, 5 p.m. on Thursday. You want a wrestling class, 6 p.m. on whatever day. Whereas here, it's like, it's all there. You just may have to maneuver yourself a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had the same approach when I was training. I think I was maybe 2-3 years into training. I noticed my takedown game in the gi was like absolutely horrendous. So I joined a judo club in Longford, and it's funny. I'm based in Leitrim. I did a judo
Okay.
club in Longford, and then I went to Mullingar for jiu-jitsu. So I was like going
Oh
all
my
these different
goodness.
places. Yeah, so it was a lot of travel, but those are skills that like I've taken on. And as anyone who asks me, like when it comes to like judo, they're all like, "Oh, doing the hip throws and that." And I was like, "Yeah, but sometimes like you're exposing your back, and that some people will chump and they will choke you." So it's knowing which throws to actually, translate over to jujitsu. And a lot
Yeah.
of people kind of neglect like foot sweeps. Like they're so effective, like
Yeah.
really effective.
Absolutely, I think so. I think it's so lovely. Like I'm obviously both so be biased in terms of jiu-jitsu, but obviously with the wrestling or with the judo, the whole like when like they'd obviously give up their back a lot in terms of pinning to stop the ippon or the pin. And what was so lovely is when I started, like obviously I wrestled in a club and then it was in the judo club, and it's like I don't want to. I can do that in my own time, but in terms of like learning the sport. I want to just learn judo. I want to learn jiu-jitsu, and I can take what I need once I've learned the basics. Because I think sometimes when people learn judo for jiu-jitsu or wrestling for jiu-jitsu, you lose out on a lot of the actual fun, like the deeper aspects of those sports. So even when I wrestled in Pedigo, it was like, no, you can teach me how to, like when you do the leg weave and they make them spin. This is the folk style wrestling, I think. It has absolutely nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. But I was like, I want to learn these aspects of the sport because I want to learn the sport as a whole, not just take the bits that I want from it, which I don't think is necessarily very respectful in that capacity. But even with judo, even when we were doing a lot of the randori and stuff, it was like, this is so whatever we were doing, I was like, this is really not relevant to jiu-jitsu at all, but it's something new that I can learn. I was super cool, and it was like, I just love being a beginner again, and I was like, I would learn all of this stuff for no reason other than to just have it in my head.
How did you find the gripping approach for going against judokas for randori? Like I found I was like, whenever I do a bit of randori, their
Yeah,
gripping is just it's
I
next
know,
level. Even though they're
I
not
know.
like deck gripping, they're just gently pinching on, and
Yeah.
then instantly they've got you on your back.
I know, it's crazy, and it's like, it's so and I remember this situation, like you said, like, being so in at the deep end. I remember it when I was a white belt in jiu-jitsu. So that's why it's really, like, cathartic or very wholesome to me, because it's like, yeah, this is good for your ego. Like, don't be fucking thinking you're all great now because 'cause you're a black belt now. I was like, this you will go th it's nice to go through that similar situation again in a different sport and be like, just give it time. And, like, whenever a white belt or anything asks me, like, "Oh, do you have any, like, advice?" or whatever, it's like, don't be rushing it. Like, everyone's they're always like, I remember not in the gym I'm at now, but like one of the ones in the US, they're like, I've been a white belt for like 2 years. Where's my blue belt? And like, when you start worrying about the next belt, it takes away, first of all, like, if you've got a coach who's like trying to like calm down your ego, I think they're kind of like, when you start asking, they tend to like maybe delay it a bit longer. But for me, in terms of whenever I say it to white belt, I'm like, look, just enjoy the sport, and then the belts and everything, they'll look after themselves. And like, that's what happened with me in jiu-jitsu, where it was like, I think I was maybe a year and a half a white belt, and the year passed in a blink because I was just enjoying training with my friends. I was in 5th year in school. I was obviously doing my exams and stuff, and I was like, it wasn't a case of I needed to be a blue belt so I could post on Instagram and like get loads of likes. It's just a fun hobby that I was doing. I got to compete in these like competitions on the weekend after school, and then after that, after the year and a half passed, and I got my blue belt, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. This is a nice little like um prize for this or like for the last year I've spent." But like, when you focus on the sport, and especially now with judo, it's like, of course I want to be the next belt immediately, you know. But actually, it's like, just enjoy the sport for what it is. Take it day by day, and the belts will look after each other. Will look after themselves.
Absolutely focus on the skill acquisition, and then like the belts usually do follow once like you start getting better and better,
Yeah, exactly.
and get all those uchikomis in as well. Like that's
Yeah.
the best way to do it. And just to kind of like tie back, to circle back, sorry, to seminars and that. Obviously you're teaching so many of them. You're on a bit of a tour
Right.
this year doing the seminars. How do you structure them so that everyone at all levels can gain some valuable insights or take something away from
Yeah.
it?
This I'm the least cockiest person ever, but there's one thing about teaching is that I'm proudly confident in. Like, I went to university to be a secondary school teacher, so I'm a qualified teacher. So it's been so grateful. Probably one of the funniest things ever is I'm somehow doing my job, but through jiu-jitsu. Like, I worked for 2 years as a PE teacher, and I now do that. I'm still doing that, but just not in the formal sense. And I think that, in my university degree, I sorry, um, I I learned like theories in terms of learning theories and learning methods and everything, and teaching methods. So it's been really great for me to use all the information that I've had in my head that I never necessarily thought I'd need, and use it in my structuring of my seminars. And even then, like, there's so many different, like, going back to theories again, where it's like, this person learns kinesthetically, so how can I structure my seminar to to adhere to that learning technique? And then this person learns visually, this person learns hourly or whatever. So I think it's been so great to have that understanding from college, that I can use that even in terms of, like, there's a question and answer afterwards in terms of the techniques. Like, I can cater all my answering and all my actual the content to how people learn. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you just maybe take us through like the planning and delivery of like a seminar? Like, how do you go about it? Do you have, just for instance, an idea in your head that, okay, this seminar, I'm going to focus on getting a takedown and then working through a passing sequence? Or what's your
Mm.
usual approach to it?
It really depends. Like, obviously most of the seminars they do are no-gi. So the warm up I would usually like I taught kids classes in Cork for about 4 years, and I kind of selfishly used a lot of those learning. I was in university when I was teaching those kids classes, so a lot of the stuff that I was learning in college, I was like applying in the teaching of the kids classes. So a lot of those games and stuff that I'd created, I didn't create. I suppose I maybe manipulated to make in order to make it more effective for jiu-jitsu. So a lot of the games that I've done in my kids' classes in the past, I use them in the seminars. So I usually start off with like there's 2 or 3 different like jiu-jitsu specific games because it's like especially people who don't know each other, it's really like it's very tactile, it's very like jiu-jitsu focused, but it's a little bit silly. And I think that really works well to like kind of like break down boundaries and like it's a bit more of like a yeah, just people they get more comfortable with each other, but also in a jiu-jitsu sense. And then it'll be like 2 to 3 takedowns, and then there'll be a full passing sequence. And then about 2 to 3 um kind of two submissions on kind of one side and passing and 2 submissions on the other side. So overall it takes the ones in 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And if I have a one seminar situation, like one seminar booked, that'll be what I will run through. And then in terms of a camp, I'll structure it differently then, but just more with more content, but in the similar actual structure.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to learn more through nearly like the play aspect,
For
where
sure.
they're having more fun. It's easier to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's even with like obviously with adults as well, but especially with kids and teens where it's like you can and even that's what AOJ does. Like AOJ don't really teach jiu-jitsu from their 3 to 5 year olds because it's all playing. But it's all playing, like it's intentional playing. So it's like you step on this like this go this like this, not this gold, this like this yellow disc and but then they're all in a line. So they're teaching them discipline through these games and they're teaching them all the techniques or all the actual like life skill that they will need going forward, but they're not telling them in like a authoritarian manner. They're kind of like tricking them into doing all these things. So that's the way to do it. I can see that in nearly all kids programs, teens programs is it's very hard to teach them like normally, let's say. You kind of have to like sneak it all in.
Disguising it. You're moving this way because you're actually learning a technique, but having
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And just trying to think, yeah, because I find even when you see like kids just like when they're learning techniques first or that like they're getting used to these like the movements and then obviously it's like muscle memory, they're building onto it. So then obviously when they're starting to learn it as they get older, they're like, oh, actually, that's the reason why we did that in that class. It wasn't just playing a game.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the way to do it. Because otherwise, like if you tell them this is a Del Riva sweep, and then that's gonna go in one ear and out the other. Whereas if there's this is a hook sweep or this is a whatever sweep, you make some sort of analogy. And like that's what look, I'm still learning the analogies. I have some dodgy analogies in many of my seminars, but those analogies are so important because that makes sense in the kid's brain. And like that's at the age that like I have taught in the past, it makes sense. Yeah, like for instance, now if you're on your back, you're playing guard, like that's like a beetle on his back, and that's the position that they have to play, and that makes sense to them rather than like play a seated guard or play a supine guard, and that doesn't make like the terminology doesn't make sense to them right now. Whereas if you go beetle on your back, then it's like okay, that makes sense. So it's all those analogies. It just clicks. It's all about how they learn. They learn visually. A lot of them will learn visually at that age.
It's making the connection. I always think of, the hitchhiker escape. I remember
Yeah,
hearing someone refer to it as the Homer Simpson, where you're
yeah,
doing like the run. And ever
yeah,
since I heard that, that's literally the first thing that pops to mind when I see
yeah.
someone doing it. Even in the gym, I'll shout out to someone, do the Homer Simpson. And they're like, what is that? And then when you explain it,
Yeah,
they're like,
exactly.
it's crazy. And I'd just like to touch on like the aspects of like competition. And you've competed in many IBJJF majors, such as like the No-Gi Europeans, Pan Ams, and the Worlds. But you've also competed on the likes of GrappleFest and Grapple Kings here in Ireland. Um, just in terms of your approach to this training, how does it differ from one another? So when you're preparing for a competition, is it different than how you would prepare for like a super fight on one of those stages?
Um, yes and no. I think with like being like obviously traveling full time and everything in the last 2 years, like and those that would have been the time that I would have been preparing for those. It's honestly just like getting good training partners and getting good rounds. Like maybe now, like when I'm kind of obviously in one place, it will be a case of making a bit more like fine-tuned and honed into the certain rule set. But what I've done in the past is that like jiu-jitsu isn't very like it's not that wide, especially when I've been doing it for so long. So I think in terms of like preparing for it, once I'm getting like good rounds with people with different games, like there's a couple of the guys, like I'm training Team FM in Cork right now, and like there's one or two of the guys who are fantastic guard players, but very, very active guard players. There's one or two of the guys that are very good stand-up players in the gi especially, or even in no-gi, and it's like that's somebody that I can adapt my game to challenge myself. And I think it's sometimes when I'm rolling, I have that perspective where it's like even one of the guys in the training, I think he's like 20 or something, but he's just like this super phenomenon. And it's like, I could play my A game against him and we could be like kind of 50-50. But like, let's put myself in a shit position. And this is when the ego comes in. And especially since like, I'm the only girl, I'm the black belt, where it's like, I really have to like have a good talking to myself. And it's like, for instance, now the guy who plays guard, I'm going to play guard against him. And I'm going to be put in a shit position. But that's what I'll be able to learn. I'll be able to troubleshoot what issues come up against somebody who passes really, really well. And I think that's really important then because I can prepare for those rule sets by like having like, I think it's like a 10-minute match for like Grapple Kings, I think. I don't know half the rules half the time. I honestly like, even for Polaris, I had to ask him beforehand. I was like, what are the rules? It's bad. But I think if I can do 10-minute matches for sure, but I think having that discussion, let's say, with my ego and like challenging myself in every round works way better for just my progression because then I'm like, okay, this is like a shorter guy who's trying to pass. He's not going to be doing very fancy passes. He's going to be staying very low and very solid, and I'm going to have to try and move my guard around him. So I really think I suppose having a goal within every round, whether that be to not get your guard passed, whether that be to like try and get one takedown and try and like I suppose accrue your points from that position. And it works really well and this is why I always say to girls sometimes who are struggling with like I get smashed all the time in training and stuff. And I was like honey, I was the only girl from the age of 17 to about 22. So like it was a long time before I had female training partners. And I was very lucky in the fact that like most of the guys I trained with were like between 65 and 75 kilos max. So like the beginning that I had to jiu-jitsu in terms of training partners, I couldn't have been luckier. We were all beginners. I think now we're all mostly black belts. And like I'm so grateful that I had that. I know people don't have that similar to I did. But I think it's a great thing for girls and just for people now who are I suppose like preparing for stuff is having a goal in every round and have a really small goal so you have some element of achievement from it. Even if it's a case of somebody who is a very good spider guard, try not to leave them either get their spider guard in or try not to get swept in spider guard. Even if it means you do nothing, that can be your only goal. And I think that's really lovely because then you can start to build on that. So he gave up after 2 minutes of trying to suit me with spider guard. Then I progressed on to something else. And you just see the holes in other people's games as well as your own then.
Do you find the positional sparring beneficial in that regard? Like, just say for spider guard, you're in that for about 5 minutes, and obviously you're not going at full pace. You're at like 50%, and then gradually building it up. Do you find that much more beneficial when preparing for a competition rather than just doing umping rounds?
I think that's more important to have both. I think for me, like people like for me, I will always play not almost play my A game, but I always play my A game in a round, whereas I don't do that in its positional stuff because I'm very focused on a certain position. So I think you need to have a balance of both. I do think positional stuff is more important for sure because I suppose you ingrain whatever position into your muscle memory, and it's like okay, what are the issues that come from, like you said, from spider guard? Okay, he can bring me above him, he can bring me back, he can bring me left or bring me right. And it's like, okay, now they know what are the different reactions. And that's the way that Mikey Musumeci trains, is he will teach his training partners all the reactions for a position and teach them very, very well. But then he'll come back and he'll try and still get that position that he wants. So he'll teach his training partners, like, okay, you can sweep me this way, this way, this way, this way, and he'll explain exactly how to do this. But then he'll get into the position and he'll try and pass regardless. So I think having, like, you're teaching the person how to defend it, but you're still trying to capitalize on the position and still trying to pass. So I think it's important to have both, but I definitely would prioritize traditional training over like just loads of rounds.
Awesome. And yeah, Mikey's approach to training is actually really cool. Like showing the people the counters to the counters so that he can come up with
Mm,
counters to that counter.
yeah.
It's insane, but it's very effective.
Yeah. Oh my god, I'm sure you can see it. Like, look, I think I always think Mikey's a bit of an Aegis. I think you need to have more to life than just jiu-jitsu. But I think in terms of jiu-jitsu, he's like you said, like he's a great brain for it, and I think that's been really monumental in his progression.
He also has pasta and pizza, according to Flow Grappling videos. So,
Exactly.
oh, crazy. And when you're like entering, just say like any of the majors or that, do you look up your opponents or do you just like solely focus on just like yourself and what you're doing rather than psyching yourself out?
Like, the thing with me is that, like, we all know each other at this stage. So, like, even from like, when I started in Cork, like, in 2014, there was just 2 girls in Cork doing it. It was me and Leodin, who is a brown belt. She doesn't train that much more, she's from BJJ Cork. So, it's just me and Leodin in Cork. So, every time I competed, I was going to Dublin or, like, nothing ever happened in Cork anyway. I think whenever there was a Cork Open, like, Mara used to come down from Limerick, and she was, like, 20 kilos lighter than me or something mad like that. So I think from that time, like there was such a small pool in Ireland that we all knew who each other were. And even now, like I'm competing in 2 weeks of the grappling industries, and like I saw there was like a few people nearly signed up, and I messaged them all. I was like, let's get a fucking division. So I think with girls, it's different because guys, there's like 50 opponents in every division, but with girls, it's like we never have. It's like people don't want to spend like €90 for one match, whereas the guys can spend €90 and have 6 matches. So I think with this especially with competing and stuff is that we've just been we all have the same issues, we all have the same we all met each other so many times, we probably fought each other so many times that we never really have that issue. Like, oh, I'll see her. And even like a friend of mine I was competing against a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh, I actually have something of hers I have to give to her. So we were competing on the same day, but I actually had like I think I had a t-shirt or a rash guard or something I had to give back to her. So I think there's that element of community in girls where it's like, look, thank God I have a second match.
Yeah, and it's great to see that there's so many more girls joining the sport. Like in our gym, I remember for a long time there was only like 2 women, and now we've a ladies only class, which is great. And now they're
Yes.
starting to like come into like the other full classes where it's open obviously
Mhm.
to everyone. And it's funny, I was actually chatting to one of the girls that trains with me on a few weeks back, and she was saying that sometimes like she feels a bit intimidated going into the class and rolling with people, especially the bigger guys, because she's afraid that
Mm,
she's going to get hurt.
yeah.
And I'd say it's probably very common as well when there's very little women in gyms.
Yeah, see, the thing with that, and this is a very probably unfeminist approach, and it's just because of the upbringing that I had, and I am very privileged in the capacity that like I had such great training partners, and they were all small. But like I think with some people who start in a ladies only class, they find it as a bit of a crutch. So like I know you won't be competing against guys if you do decide to compete, but there's something in terms of like self defense or anything like, of course, like but sometimes, like for me, I never had the opportunity to not train with guys. If I want to do jiu-jitsu, I have to. And I think I'm a massive fan of female beginners courses, but in terms of female class, I think there's some element there where you need to do both. Whereas if you just do one, it can become quite a safe space, which is so I'm so glad. Like I run a women's class as well, and I can see that. But I'm so encouraging of like just guiding the girls into like try the main class, find a good training partner. I'll help you find a good training partner because otherwise, like you said, like people will struggle to like train with guys because of the fear of getting hurt. But in actual fact, I get hurt by girls more than guys because it's like I'm gonna take a piece of her now because she's a black belt and she's a female. When it was the guys, I maybe because it's a case of like she's only a girl. We'll just flow around with her. Um, there's just this interesting dynamic there, and I think female beginners courses are the way forward because
Yeah.
then they have the opportunity after being around girls for 6 weeks to go into a female only class, which is obviously completely justified. Like obviously people have experiences that they don't want to live through, and they find a really lovely outlet in the girls classes. However, for me, if I had gone into just a women's only classes, I'd be still there now. Whereas with the guys, like my best training partners are the handful of guys in Team FM who are under 70 kilos. And that is because there's not many girls. I'm aware of that, and not many girls at the colored belts and stuff. But there is something very important about training with guys as well, and I don't even know what it is. Maybe because it builds resilience or something. But yeah, I just think I'm not a massive fan of the women's only class only, and like nobody ever trains anywhere else, like in other aspects, because it's really important, and it's such a unique thing about jiu-jitsu is that you're tangled up in each other with somebody that you don't really know, and it's very childlike, it's very to anybody else it looks fucking ridiculous, but I think it's an important part to jiu-jitsu itself is that you get to train with both genders.
Yeah, and it gives you more opportunities to learn different
Yeah,
styles. Everyone has so many
exactly.
different
Exactly,
styles
yeah.
and yeah, absolutely, I agree with you there. Having it as like the women's only beginners course, and then slowly,
Mhm.
obviously, integrate into
Yeah.
the full classes. And I suppose gyms would probably see like more women in it. They'll probably be more encouraged to actually join it rather than just
Mm,
going to maybe like an 8 week course and then probably dropping off after a while because they're like, I don't
yeah,
want to do that.
exactly, and even then, like, you can see it with, like, beginners courses that go on, and it's like they're mixed. But then it's like if a girl starts on her own, it's very hard, especially at the very, very start when it's like all this crazy like beginner white belt at the start, because it's a girl who wants to try a new thing, but she is against all these mammoths. So it's very, very intimidating. And then those are situations now where it's like a women's beginner course, a woman coach. Those are all aspects to a new woman starting that will allow them to continue. Yeah, so I think it's definitely like it's such a new thing, and even in terms of like women's only classes and like more than like two women in the gym, excuse me, there's very new issues that are popping up that nobody has really dealt with before because there's never been more than a handful of women in the gym. And I think like it's something now that I have no interest in because I coach women's class and that's it. Like I do not I don't want to ever own my own gym. I don't want to like coach full time. I just want to train. So I don't really have any intention of like finding out the solution to this problem. But like I think for me is that there's a lot of things in terms of being a coach that you need to be aware of when there's more, it's like say 10 girls on the mat, such as like intermingling and like different dynamics that happen within girls, like groups of girls that a lot of people aren't aware of because it hasn't really been an issue for any gyms yet because it's so new. Like the only gym that had more than 5 girls in Ireland like 5 years ago was East Coast. And then it gradually like then Jungle started and then George Santos and then even then like in a handful of gyms in Cork there's like more than one girl, which is great. In Galway like there's loads of gyms with more girls, but I think it really is really important to be aware of those dynamics because they can rot a gym from the inside out, like.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, isn't it? A lot of
For
people they
sure.
just have to get exposed to it and then, build on that dynamic and
Yeah,
just be there for like having fun and enjoying jiu-jitsu rather than
exactly.
focusing on any drama that kicks off or
Yeah.
anything like that
I
essentially.
know, I know. It's just I never started for that. I started because I love jujitsu, and I'm so lucky that I've found great friends that just like jujitsu. They just want to train. We'll chat afterwards, you know. And if we don't, that's fine. Like it's just there's a mutual love of the sport, and yeah, I think it's something that's very, very, very wholesome and it's very important for the progression of the sport.
And where do you see actually the future of the sport of jiu-jitsu going? Whether it's in Ireland, where do you see it heading there, or even as a sport itself?
Right now, I think it'll go the way that boxing is going. Unfortunately. I don't I like in terms of like because I think when the gi was held in such a high esteem, there's something very traditional and like all the Brazilians and like Hickson, like this is going back to Hickson's time, it was like the greatest, I don't know if that's a word, were the ones who won gi worlds, IBJJF gi worlds. And right now, I think when that importance is being taken off of it, because everybody fucking hates IBJJF or whatever, I don't know. But now it's like they're the greatest. Like, can you tell me who has won, I don't know, like some random competition like for the last like in 1999? No, but I could probably tell you who won it at IBJJF Worlds because it was one of the goats probably. And I think the superstars in the sport right now are the ones who have spent a lot of time in the gi, and I think honestly, I think people who just do the gi, this is like I'm a gi stan, is that there's something very humbling about it. That when you don't do it, your ego gets a bit away with like runs away with yourself a small bit because it's like it's a part of jiu-jitsu that's not like that's not maybe put enough importance on, and because it's not, and because it's been taken off and put onto the no-gi, you have the trash talking, you have the Instagram, you've got all the content. It's like they're more focused on content than they are on jiu-jitsu. And like that whole aspect of the culture, like I was talking about earlier, is that that's what will bring the sport down. When in actual fact, like if you look at the people who are registered for Gi Worlds, they are some of the best athletes in the world, and nobody even knows their names most of the time, you know? And like it's just I think it's something that's very interesting, and I hope that it builds the sport in a positive light. That we've got like what like I don't know, UK people, Irish people, Brazilian, American, all on podiums of Gi World, and like importance is given to it, and equal importance is given to no-gi, but not higher. Because right now, like there's a divide, and I know ADCC is on, and like they've got all the Who's Number One shows where people can make money, which is fantastic. And like I made money on Who's Number One, and like I've made money on all the shows that I've been on. But in terms of for the progression of the sport, I just think it's so important to like. That's why like everybody needs to train in the gi at least once a week. That's my belief on it. Like I could do 5 no-gi sessions and be fit in fucking class by myself, and I'll do one no-gi class or one gi class, and I'd be like, wow, take notes, like like it's a reality check, and not enough people are getting reality checks, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't understand why a lot of people like shit on people who train in the gi. Like honestly, it's jujitsu, and
Yeah.
yeah, I know no gi is probably like people prefer like the leg lock game and probably like the speed element to it. But
Mhm.
like if you get into like rolling with someone in the gi, and they can be so technical, and people will be like, oh, it's because they have the grips to slow you down. No, there's a lot happening there. There's
Yeah,
so much.
that's a pet hate of mine when somebody's like, yeah, they just tangle you up in the grips, and it's like, learn how to break the grip slow.
Yeah,
I have no tolerance for that bullshit, like, and it's like for me, like I'm nowhere near as good, not even half as good in the gi as I am in no gi, but I think because I had a Brazilian coach growing up or in jiu-jitsu, so maybe that's why it's instilled into me. But like, I'll never not train in the gi just because I'm better in the no-gi. I think it's so important, and that's what's so beautiful about jiu-jitsu is that you have that. You can have that balance between gi and no-gi. You can be shit at one and good at the other, or great at both. But if you have one or the other, there's a massive divide there because you're just training one half of the sport, and the other one gets forgotten about, and that's sometimes the most important.
yeah, absolutely. Like I love training in the gi. I love doing no gi, but like it doesn't suit my timetable to do those classes. So like I'll do mostly gi, but like it just whenever you hear someone, even a competition, it's like, he's good, but like all he does is gi. He doesn't do much no gi. You're just like,
I
still
know.
doesn't matter. Actually, they're still training jujitsu.
Ah, and like that's the thing as well with even in competitions. It's like for me, like I didn't start really like I started competing on shows and stuff in 2021, and the only reason I got on shows, like I never asked to be on a show, I never asked for a seminar, I never asked for anything. People came to me, and whenever people come to me about like how do we like get on shows or how do we like make money from jiu-jitsu, and I was like, I when I was a white, blue, and purple belt, I was competing every single weekend, win, lose, or draw. And sometimes now people may look at a division and be like, oh god, this person's in that division. When it's like, yeah, I had that growing up. I had a Reno from East Coast. There was Amanda from East Coast. It was everybody from East Coast. It was always like it was me from Cork and then all of the East Coast girls. But they're fantastic. I like they're what some of my favorite people in the world. But I think with that, it was like they'd be like, oh, this person, I don't want to go and register for this division because person X is in that division. But like that's the wrong perspective to have because for me, like when I was in the blue and purple belt division or whatever, I would be like, okay, person X is in that division. Let's have a match this weekend. Win, lose, or draw. We'll probably fight each other in about 2 weeks' time. And then whatever's happened, I'll be able to take the data, collect data from the first match, to then inform the second match. I won't just shy away from any matches just because I think I'm going to lose or think I'm going to win. Like, it's the wrong perspective to have. And because I've competed so much, it has given me so much, I suppose, experience, honestly. My face was everywhere in terms of competing. Every competition for about 4 years, I was at all of them, you know? And I think that's how you get to where I am. Like, I am very, very grateful that I don't have to work because I can make my living from jiu-jitsu. That only happened because I competed so much, win, lose, or draw. I kept my values clear in terms of I was only ever doing it for the jiu-jitsu. I was not doing it for fame. I was not doing it for like attention or Instagram. And
Yeah,
yeah, and I just think that yeah, keeping the right people around you because that's the way you progress.
100%. And you're building that XP. And as you said, you're
Yeah,
taking back that information. Like, you see a lot of people kind of shying away from competition just because they're like, oh, I went up against that person before and lost. If that's me, I'd be like, no, definitely have to go again, see if I can
yeah,
beat them this time.
for
Like, see if what
sure.
I'm working on will do the job this time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there was a great example of this now for me. And like I was like 19. I think I was 20 as a purple belt. And and it was so hard. And it was still probably one of the hardest weekends, not ever, like it was dramatic. But like I fought the same girl 4 times, twice in gi, twice in no gi, and I lost every single time. And it was like, and that's what I tried. The first match now, it was a fairly quick submission. And I was like, fuck, I have to come back now. Because then that was the gi absolute. And that was the gi division, and we're going to the gi absolute. And I was like, okay, gi absolute then. I lost by points. The next day, then the no gi division, I lost by an advantage. And then the last match, then I lost by the no gi absolute. I lost by referee's decision. So it was like, for me, I think I had 4 silver medals or something. It was just me and her. I had 4 silver medals, but and I was upset. I was like, "Fucking hell!" Like, and they were my only competition, but whatever. But it was what I had taken from it is that like I had been submitted in about 1 minute, then I had lost on points, then I had lost on by an advantage, and then I lost by decision. So like there was some element of progression happening there. But if I hadn't done it, if I'd given up after the first loss, I would have had nothing to show for myself. Like I only had fucking 4 default medals to show for myself, but it was a hell of a lot better than not even showing up. And I think that's important. Like, a lot of people don't do it because, like you said earlier, they don't want to post about a loss on Instagram. And like, and I think for me, maybe because Instagram wasn't really a thing back then. It wasn't back then. It wasn't that terrible. It wasn't long ago at all. But for me, it was just I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm only doing it because I love jiu-jitsu, and this is a really, really tough challenge that I didn't know how to deal with, but I gradually found some element of progression.
It's been persistent to leading to progress, essentially.
Exactly, exactly.
Rosa, thank you so much for your time today. I've really,
No,
really enjoyed this
me too.
podcast. It's
Thank
been
you
really
so
fun.
much.
And my final question for you is if anyone wanted to get in contact to see what you're up to these days, maybe book you for a seminar, where's the best place to reach you?
Just send my Instagram. Yeah, just message me there or whatever you want. But I don't really want to do any more seminars. I'm sorry. So if you want, like, yeah, I don't know, maybe come to like guest coach or something. But in terms of seminars, like, I'm sick of them. But yeah, but it's definitely Rosa BJJ is my Instagram.
That's perfect. And just so everyone doesn't forget, Rosa is sponsored by Kings and Perry. So
Yeah.
make sure to use discount code support Rosa on her jiu-jitsu journey.
Thank you.